Hey guys, welcome to video 106. It's been quite a while since the last video, and as you may remember, I built the power supply for the amplifier and the transformer was mislabeled and it actually came out to be 100 volts higher than it was supposed to. So I had to wait for the new one to arrive, take out the old one, replace it, and it got me way behind schedule, but I did get the amplifier built. And this is the final schematic that I came up with. All of the voltages in the blue boxes were our design goals, and the voltages in red boxes are the measured values I came up with for the final amplifier. All the currents we designed for are in yellow boxes, and I didn't bother measuring those because, it's just impractical to do that once you have the amplifier built. Now, there's virtually no difference between this schematic and the previous final value that I came up with, except that I mislabeled the voltages for the first stage here in the previous schematic. I accidentally put the values for the second half of the 12AX7 in both places. The plate voltage that we were shooting for was about 221 volts, and the cathode voltage was 2.6, and as you can see, the measured values come up pretty close. Now let's go on over and take a look at the power supply. Now that I've got the correct transformer in the circuit, everything's working just about perfectly, but when I finally finished the amplifier, there was one issue, and that was a little bit too much hum in the preamp section, in particular the 12AX7 of the amplifier, and that was due to the filament power supply. And the way that I corrected that was by adding this artificial center tap to the low voltage secondary. It's just 200 ohm resistors tapped in the middle and sent to ground, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but I added this to the amplifier and it reduced the hum almost completely. So this was a slight modification, and you may need to do this if you decide to build the amplifier yourself. It's very easy to add, and it really does reduce the hum. But let's go over and talk about that a little bit. Some power transformers come with a center tapped filament winding for just this purpose, so if you've got that, you don't have to create one of these artificial center taps. And an alternative to a fixed divider is to use a potentiometer, as shown here. Sometimes this circuit's called a humdinger, and it allows you to trim it to minimize hum. It works a little bit better than the fixed divider. You can use a pot anywhere from maybe 200 to 300 ohms. It's going to be linear, and power rating typically 1 or 2 watts is what would be used here. Now we can take our attempt at hum reduction one step further by, instead of connecting the center tap to ground, we would connect it to a higher DC voltage, typically something from 25 to 50 volts. In order to do this in our amp, we'd have to construct a voltage divider off of the high voltage power supply, and it would be a lot of screwing around. So if I was going to try this, I would just connect the center tap to the highest stable DC voltage we have in our circuit, which is the cathodes of the push-pull stage right here. And that would help a little bit more to suppress hum if it was necessary. I don't think you would even have to resort to that in this design, but it's another possibility. Okay, now what I want to do next is talk a little bit about the construction of the amplifier. So let's go on over this next page and take a look at some of the tools and things that I had used here. Now we've got the usual things that you always need: a soldering iron, side cutters, needle nose pliers, screwdrivers, and so on. But some other things that are nice to have are wire strippers, a heat gun of some sort, because you're probably going to want to use some heat shrink tubing here or there, and the heat gun is obviously ideal for that. These helping hands are very nice for holding components in place when you're soldering, and You can also use the alligator clips to hold components, as I've shown over here, and they also make a decent heat sink for when you're soldering diodes and other sensitive components. Solder wick, solder paste, and these tip cleaners are also very handy to have. Now, I like to use mini grabber clips for jumpers and also on the ends of my meter leads because they're a little more secure clipping onto a component rather than poking in there with a standard test probe, which could slip and short something out. So mini grabber clips are really nice to have. Now, as far as wiring goes, there are a lot of options. You could use the old school cloth insulated wire, which is just fine. What I used in this build was silicone insulated stranded wire, and I like it because it's really flexible and easy to use, easy to strip, and the insulation is really heat resistant. You can just heat a solder joint as hot as you want and it won't melt this silicone insulation. You could also strip it off and use it as spaghetti to insulate other components. Of course, you could always just buy spaghetti, which is this cloth insulation that you can use. And of course, there's the heat shrink tubing. Now, sometimes you want to use shielded cable in your wiring, and that's if you have a long input run to a high gain tube like a 12AX7 or something. There's a good chance if you use just a regular piece of wire it could pick up a lot of noise. Shielded cable will prevent that, or at least help to prevent that noise pickup. So you could just cut a piece off of these BNC, well, not BNC, RCA connectors. I'm also using these to connect the reverb spring to the amplifier as well, but it's a good source of shielded cable. Now let's go on over to the next page, and I want to talk a little bit about the order of construction and some other wiring tips and so on. Now, the first part that you're going to build is the power supply and probably the filament wiring too. And one thing to remember is that when you build the power supply, initially there's no load on it. None of the other sections are constructed. So the supply voltage is going to be pretty high compared to its normal operating value, typically around 10% higher than normal. So what I like to do after wiring up the power supply and the filaments on all of the tube sockets is to construct the push-pull output section. This section is going to load down the power supply pretty significantly and bring it close to its operating level. Here I have the power supply constructed and the push-pull stage, and we can see it's pulled the power supply almost down to its normal 300 volt level. It's still a little bit high, but once I can construct all these other sections, it'll come down to 300 volts. And one thing you have to remember is when you do wire up the push-pull pair that you have to have an appropriate load on the amplifier anytime you power it up. Here I've got an 8 ohm resistor connected to my speaker jack, and what happens is if you run the push-pull section without a load, the AC load line extends out, well, it becomes practically horizontal, and it can result in thousands of volts being applied to your push-pull tubes and the output transformer. And there's a good chance that you'll probably blow the output transformer secondary winding. So you always have to be sure to have a load on the amplifier whenever you power it up, regardless of whether you're applying a signal or not. So what we're looking at right now is the completed power supply and the push-pull section of the amplifier. Let's go on over to the next page and look at some of the other wiring. Over here on the left side of the page, you can see that I've got most of the amplifier completed now, and I've used some of the insulation from the hookup wire as spaghetti to insulate leads on these components. I'm using an alligator clip here to hold this lead in place while I solder. And also notice that with this layout, the tweed style cabinet and so on, with your tubes on one side of the chassis, your pots on the other side, you end up with some pretty long signal wire runs from here, the 12AX7, over to the gain and tone pots. So I did use some shielded cable here. That's this thick black wire that you can see, and it did work very well in reducing noise pickup. Over here on the right hand side, I've finished wiring everything in the amplifier, and I'm doing some testing. You can see the reverb spring is connected. My speaker is connected via this jack, and the only thing left to do is mount the chassis inside the cabinet. Now, I should also mention that this is the point in testing where I discovered the excessive hum due to the filaments on the 12AX7 floating. So this is when I connected the artificial center tap to the filament winding, which suppressed that noise. All right, now let's go on over and take a look at the finished product. Here's the back and front views of the finished amplifier, and I did add an extra strain relief for the cord back here on this board that mounts on the back bottom of the amplifier. Here's what that looks like. I put this on here just in case I would trip over the cord or something. I don't want to be yanking on the chassis really super hard. That would be probably kind of disastrous, so that adds a little safety margin there. Now, what I'm going to do next is a quick demo of the operation of the tone control and the reverb circuit for this amplifier. It's not going to be a comprehensive test. I'm going to get a friend of mine to test it for me, and we'll video that. And that'll be a more objective test of what the amplifier sounds like, I think, than me playing through it. So right now, I just want to show you how effective this single knob tone control and the reverb are. Okay, quick demo of the tone control and reverb operation. So this is the amplifier set for relatively low volume, all clean, no reverb, no effects, and the tone control set for about the middle of its travel. Alright, let's set it for bass. Now let's bring it up for treble. Quite a bit brighter and louder, so we get pretty good effective range from a single simple tone control. Alright, now we're in the regular normal reverb mode, so let's add about 50% reverb. And if we turn it all the way up, still in the normal mode. Pretty good. Now let's turn it down and switch to the super reverb mode. And if we want to, we can eliminate the dry signal altogether by turning the gain down to 0. And this is just the reverb spring signal. It's pretty deep and rich, and we can also add the dry signal back in. And get rid of the reverb altogether if we want to. So there you go. Alright, what the heck, a little Robin Trower. Okay, now as I said before, I'm going to get a friend of mine to play his guitar through the amplifier in the next video, and we'll get a more complete evaluation of how good or bad the amplifier sounds. But in the meantime, I want to show you some waveforms of the output in response to a sine wave and a square wave applied to the input, just to get an idea of what the tone control does to these signals. Okay, in this first example, I'm applying a 300 Hz square wave with an amplitude of about 125 millivolts peak to peak. It's pretty low amplitude, similar to what you'd get from a guitar. And the output is 8 volts peak to peak with the tone control set in the middle of its travel. We can see there's not too much alteration of the shape of the waveform. I mean, we're going to expect to see some of this anyway because we're going through quite a few stages, and we're using a transformer on the output which doesn't have the greatest high frequency response anyway. That's why we have this rounding. But this is what we get with the tone control set for the mid range of its travel. Now when I set it for maximum bass, we're getting a little bit more distortion of the signal, and it's eliminating a lot of the high frequency content, and we're getting a little more phase shift here. The output now is 12 volts peak to peak. And if we set the tone control for maximum treble, this is the output waveform we get. This is pretty typical of a high pass filter. And again, we're getting about 12 volts peak to peak out. So if you want to look at signals in and out of your amplifier just to see if it's working the way it should be, these are more or less what you should be seeing. And finally, the last waveform we're going to look at is I applied a sine wave to the input, and I connected the blue channel of my oscilloscope to the input of the phase splitter. I had about 24 volts peak to peak there. The yellow waveform is the output into an 8 ohm load. We're getting 24 volts peak to peak at clipping, and that corresponds to an output of around 10 watts RMS. And you can see it's pretty symmetrical, pretty decent clipping as we'd expect from this push-pull stage. And before we wrap up the video for today, I just want to go over some final thoughts about the amplifier. Overall, it really works well. I know I didn't get a chance to demonstrate that today, but that'll come up in the next video. Some of the things that I would do differently, number one, I'd eliminate the normal reverb mode and just implement the super reverb. It turns out that you can get the normal reverb operation in the super mode, just have it turned down to minimum amount of reverb. So that's kind of a redundant feature, and I'd eliminate that and just go with the super reverb. And since that frees up a switch on the front of the panel, I would probably implement some sort of negative feedback loop to change the overdrive characteristics of the amplifier and mess around with that a little bit. And I'd also add the artificial center tap to the filament winding in the transformer right from the beginning to save the trouble of having to go back and connect it in after everything else was done. And that wraps it up for today's video. The plan is for the next video to get a buddy of mine to play the guitar through the amplifier, and we'll give it a full test. So hopefully that'll work out okay, and I will see you guys next time around.